I'm an archaeologist, which means I'm a bit like an ancient detective. There are lots of different types of archaeologists, and we dig in the earth to look for the remains and behaviour of humans, animals, and even dinosaurs. To find those clues, sometimes we have to dig them up. Brilliant! A dinosaur! Do you think he saw us? Oh, what have I got here? It's a bowl. Do you think they ate porridge out of this? Or maybe some birch muesli? Not really my style, though, anyway. Gold! Yes! Cool, that was really exciting. That was 3 things in less than 5 minutes. But it was really naughty. Because if I dug an archaeological site like that, well, I'd have ruined all of the evidence for anybody else who'd come along. Once the site has been dug up, it's gone forever, unless it's recorded. So I'm going to put it all back. Phew! It's been a really long time since I learned how to dig properly. So I'm going for a little refresher course with my friend Andy, who teaches archaeology. Hi, Andy.
Hi, Faye, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm great.
This looks very cool. What's going on here?
So this is our mock training excavation. This is where we train up students before we take them overseas into Africa or other areas of the world to excavate. Obviously, excavation is destructive, and we need to make sure that everybody knows how to do it before we go and excavate the real thing.
So, Andy, the reason why this site has actually been divided into squares is so that it makes it easier to record things, isn't it?
That's right. It's very difficult for us to get every single tiny artefact. We're interested in everything from large sort of bones right down to things like little tiny rodent bones which tell us about past environments. So we want to make sure we record everything, and this enables us to record these things and make sure we don't miss anything.
And so they need to dig really carefully and slowly, don't they, so they don't damage anything as they dig it up?
Well, that's right, because this stuff may have been in the ground for millions of years, so it's been slowly degrading. Sometimes things are really fragile, so they have to be stuck back together again.
Cool. Well, I'm really keen to have a go. Can we get stuck in?
Let's go. Great. So, there's a brush for you.
Thank you.
And, of course, because we want to collect everything has to go into a bucket. And then what happens is that will then go and get sieved, and we search through it and make sure we've got all of the different types of fossils. So you simply start by stripping everything back, keeping a very, very close eye that we can find any archaeological artifacts, bits of bones, stone tools, stuff like this. It's a very slow process, but that moment when you find that one thing, that's the big thing, that's the big discovery, that's what we're all looking for.
Archaeology is really like a big jigsaw puzzle, isn't it? You're putting pieces back together to tell you a much bigger picture story.
That's right. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. You're trying to find out what happened here millions of years ago.
I mean, the dirt around the objects is just as important as the objects themselves, isn't it?
Well, that's right. Ultimately, in archaeology, what we call the context, where the fossil comes from, is the most important thing. That's what tells us everything about the date of the fossil normally, tells us about the environment that it may have lived in. So understanding the stratigraphy is very, very important. Stratigraphy being looking at the different layers and how they have formed through time.
Andy, how do you actually test how old things are?
And this is what I do for a living, is trying to work out how old the archaeological layers are. We can do this via a number of means. So we can actually date the time that different types of minerals in the sediment were buried. We can date the teeth of the fossils themselves directly. The one that most people will be familiar with is when we date things like charcoal using a method called radiocarbon dating. That only allows us to date back about 50,000 years, whereas what I excavate is normally millions of years.
Later on Get Clever, I find out how space-age technology is taking us back in time.
Time. Some say it flies when you're having fun, but drags when we're bored.
Yeah, like right now?
I'm assuming you mean time's flying then.
Yes.
But the perception of time is actually something that your brain creates itself. It depends on your environment and your surroundings. It depends on your emotions, how amused you are by what's happening, as well as your attention to that thing.
Right, so when I'm with my friends and having a really good time, time goes really fast.
Absolutely.
But when I'm doing something really boring, it seems to drag.
Absolutely. So our brain is actually able to change the way that we see something. And it's actually something really easy to show you.
Stick around, because later on I put time to the test.
You might not know what stop-motion animation is, but you've probably seen it. It's how the films Wallace and Gromit, Shaun the Sheep, and even Chicken Run were brought to life. Now, I was lucky enough to meet Peter Lord, who brought all of these clay characters to life with animation magic.
Hi, I'm Peter Lord, and I'm creative director and co-founder of Aardman.
When I met Peter, he'd just finished working on an animation about cavemen called Early Man.
People say stop motion. It means you've got a puppet of some sort, and you move it a bit and take a picture, and move it a bit and take a picture, and move it a bit and take a picture, and so on. By that mechanism, you give a thing life that doesn't have life. The technique that we use, stop motion, is the same now as it was 100 years ago, but the tools have changed. In the past, we worked on film. Now it's all done digitally, but the real heart of the job is the same as it ever was.
An art teacher named William Harbert discovered that by mixing lots of different chemicals, he could make a new putty-like clay. And that was back in 1897.
We make models at least partly out of modelling clay, plasticine, as we say in England. It's like ordinary clay that people make pottery with, but it has oil in it instead of water, and so it stays flexible. So you can put a piece on the table, move it, and you can come back a week later and move it again, and it'll still move. Whereas if it was regular clay, it would have dried out, it would crack. Our technique, stop motion, especially stop motion with clay, is handmade, spontaneous, fun, and the animation itself has a kind of a life to it, a spontaneity. Claymation characters are limited by their physicality because they are fixed to the earth, they're heavy, so we know its limitations and maybe let the computer help you with the difficult stuff.
And that's not the only science involved in animation. There's lots of maths and time involved too.
And this is Doug, and he's the star of Early Man. So if one animator was to take Doug and make him run across the screen, you have to shoot him frame by frame and put him in all the different positions of that run. That might take him a day to shoot.
Claymation worlds are actually tiny, but they look much bigger on camera. But they've all been created so that they're all in scale and in proportion with each other.
So now this character, Doug, is pretty well the classic size. Wallace in Wallace and Gromit is about that size. Ginger from Chicken Run, about that size. The tallest ones we ever use are maybe that size. So if you're making a film about frogs, research frogs, find out how they really live, what they really do, and then play with it, you know. So with Neolithic Man, we looked at some books.
Although even Peter admits there's not a great deal of science behind the story of his latest film, Early Man.
So we didn't really try very hard. It was a choice we made, a deliberate choice. We're really making a film about the way people think cavemen were, rather than anything to do with how they really were. It's not realistic. It's just a fun story.
So if you stick with your science homework, you never know where it might take you. Perhaps even into the art of animation.
So, Kristen, you ready?
Yes.
So take your fingers and put them in front of your face and click them. Right, so what happened for you?
Well, I clicked and I heard the sound and I saw all my fingers clicking.
Exactly. You use two senses, your vision and your hearing. So your eyes and your ears to hear and see that click happening. And your brain felt like those were happening at the same time. But those two senses actually send information to the brain at two different speeds. So what that means is you actually hear the click before you see the click. So there's a tiny fraction of time between those two things happening, but you don't perceive it. Your brain simply takes that time and deletes it. So from your perspective, the click happened all at the same time.
That is crazy.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah, I really don't understand it, but it's really cool.
Earlier on Get Clever, I met up with my friend Andy for a refresher course on how to dig an archaeological site.
This isn't a real site, it's, we actually built it. So at the bottom of here somewhere is 2 million year old Africa. And back in 2009, when the students started excavating it, they were digging in 19th century Melbourne.
Wow.
So each year the students get sort of a different experience.
So really, the most recent things are on the top and the oldest things are on the bottom.
This is the first thing we use to work out how old something is. Ultimately, if it's higher up, it should be younger. If it's older, it's at the bottom.
You've dug in Africa a lot, haven't you?
I have. We're very, very lucky. We excavate a very, very rich site in South Africa, and we generally find early human fossils almost every year.
You often find a lot more of our rubbish that we've left behind in life than the actual people.
That's it. I mean, archaeology really is about rubbish. It's about what's left behind, and we're trying to recreate a story to a certain degree which is based on probably only 10% of what may have actually once existed. So it's a real challenge. As with all science, we don't always get it right, but we go back, we excavate, we go to other sites, and we slowly piece it all together. You can be sat here digging, you can find a fossil, and that can change everything that we know about who we are and where we came from.
It's exciting.
It is.
Andy, I think we found something.
I think you have. In actual fact, I think those might be teeth.
I think they are, look.
Now, Faye, that's a very rare find to find something like that.
I know, I'm very excited.
So at this point, we really need to sort of stop. And this is where we would begin to sort of get very, very fine tools to be able to work around it. Bone is normally very fragile, and it's so rare that we have to be even more careful than we were before.
Okay, so what are we going to do?
Well, so this is where we get our trusty old chopsticks. Because the point is, using wood, we don't want to damage the bone. So if we do accidentally scrape it, metal and things like that are quite abrasive. We don't want to create any marks on the bones, because those little tiny marks that we might see on the teeth can all tell us things like the diet, what the animal was eating, etc. So the first thing obviously we need to know is, well, what is it the teeth of?
Starting. Does it all come clear now?
It is. And you can see here, that's your front teeth.
Yeah.
In actual fact, we can tell that this is actually a jaw.
We've got our jaw in situ, in the square, and we don't want to take it out because we've just said how important everything else is here. What do we do next?
The standard way that we do this is that we have this thing over here, which is called a total station. It basically will send a little light beam out from it. The light beam can hit the artifact and will bounce back, and it will give it a coordinate in space. We know the exact position. Because this is a very special find, it's a very rare find, what we can also do sometimes is, with modern technology, we can actually 3D scan it in situ.
Oh,
So
wow.
we'll show you how to do that now.
That'd be great, because I've never seen that done before.
So this is called a space spider scanner and was actually built to work on the International Space Station so that they can scan and print parts that they need for the space station so that they can keep operating. Basically take sort of photos to create a realistic three-dimensional scan of the artifact.
Okay, shall we see how it works?
Okay, well, it's a little bit like doing the ironing to a certain degree. you can actually then see,
Oh, yes.
so you can see the teeth and everything.
Thanks so much, Andy. That was amazing.
It was a pleasure. You shouldn't leave it so long next time.
I won't, I promise. Now, can I give you the chopstick and the trowel back?
Thank you.
Thank you. And I dig ya.
Bye.
Bye.